Great.
Okay.
Wonderful. Okay, so hi, welcome to Equity Gallery. My name is Michael Gormley, and I'm the executive director here. And bear with us with this. I'm still not used to this whole online Zoom thing, but we wanted to bring this to you because we think it's really important. So we are currently hosting a show of paintings by Ben Pritchard, and I'm going to just do a little bit of an introduction, and then we are going to show you a short video of the show so you can see what the installation looks like. And then we're going to have, Ben is going to be in conversation with David Cohen. I met David Cohen and Ben Pritchard whilst I was working at the New York Studio School. At that juncture, Ben had just finished his studies there and was working as a faculty assistant and a studio technician. And David was curating at the gallery, and they were a wonderful pair to have met whilst I was working there. And Ben then went on to study at the Royal Academy in London, which is quite prestigious. It takes about 16 students a year into their master's course, career course. And they pay you to go there. So that's how wonderful it is. And you have the likes of David Hockney sort of trevissing through your studio telling you what great work you're doing. And I've stayed in touch with Ben when he came back to stateside, which was a couple of years ago. I think he was in London for about 7 years. And I've really closely watched his work. And the first time I went to see his work again, so probably a good idea is if you all should mute yourselves, that would be wonderful. Yeah, we want to hear the kids, but we want to hear each other too. So everybody put each other on mute. Thanks so much. Anyway, so, and Ben was showing at M. David and Company, which is then Life on Mars in Bushwick. He did a show with Fran O'Neill, and it was a spectacular exhibition. Ben has since shown a couple of times at that location and others in New York. David, as you know, is everybody's hero in the art world. There's very few that are as erudite as David is. And runs, as you know, artcritical, where he has some excellent writings posted. And stay tuned for that, because I think there's always something new and exciting to see on that site. All right, so that's enough from me. I just want to talk a little bit about Equity Gallery before I forget. We were founded in 1947. We were doing emerging artists before anybody knew what the word meant. It was founded by this prestigious group of artists, including Edward Hopper, Louise Nevelson, Leon Kroll, who all felt that artists were best positioned to help other artists. And we continue to do that. And we seek out artists who are emerging at all points in their career to make sure that they get seen. And that's what we do. We're a non-for-profit. We're an artist association, which means we're a member organization, and you all can join. I really welcome you all at some point to visit the site or visit us here at the gallery if you're not COVID shy, and see what we're doing. We've been, again, in continuous operation since 1947 and do spectacular shows, I think, anyway. And we're really providing a great service to the arts community because we're not totally tied to the market. So we can take lots of experiments and lots of risks, which makes for great art. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is stop talking. And Matt Rhoda, who is one of our trustees, you should give him a round of applause because trustees are always great people, is going to run a bit of a video on the exhibition. So Matt, are you ready to go with that? Here we go. This is the front room of the gallery. It's a combination of paintings and works on paper. It was important for Ben to hang largely in constellations, and you'll see some of that. And there should be another small video of the back room. There you go. Again, you notice there's sort of a lovely constellation hangs. Great. Okay, thank you. And better, of course, if you can, this show's up for 2 more weeks. Do come by to try to see it in person. So I'm going to turn it over now to David Cohen and Ben Pritchard and hear a great conversation about this show.
Thank you very much indeed, Michael. Michael, can you turn the volume down on your computer? Because there's nothing quite as weird as hearing an echo of yourself. Of course, anyone who's called China or Russia in the middle of the night has had that experience, but wonderful. I can't tell you how happy I am to be. I'm an early adopter with Zoom, at least in the COVID era.
Here it is. Yeah.
Can I be?
Please mute your Zoom, please. Dad's here.
Fantastic. You better watch what you're saying. Dot your I's and cross your T's, Mr. Pritchard, because Senior is here and he needs to be proud of you. Yeah, you probably just detected the fact that we are very post-COVID here on account of the fact that the two of us, well, I could even have done that, couldn't we?
Yeah, we could.
The two of us are, yeah, no, we've all each got our own, but the two of us have survived our encounters with this nasty little virus, and that gives us the antibodies so that we can sit next to each other in a gallery. But pleasurable though it is to be sitting next to Ben, I can't tell you how delectable it is to be talking about paintings and actually have them here, and I can see some in front of me. We're in the back room, but the back room has a equal status with the front room. I think in this gallery, it's not really, it's just the other half of the gallery. Exquisite gallery space on Broome Street on the Lower East Side. Yeah, the illustrious history to which Michael gave us a brief summary, it reverberates. But the point is, yeah, actually to be here physically with the work. And your work, Ben, is nothing if not physical. There's a sense of texture, the palpable, and although they're often dealing with primary and reductive shapes, they are always, and the color is emphatic in them, there's this physicality and texture and painterliness, as it was once called, is, as I say, so palpable that they really have a very dynamic singularity in person. And you call this show Ecstatic Visions of the Day. Now, we're going to talk about how earnest and how ironic that title was, but I love the idea of having a guaranteed ecstatic vision on a daily basis. That's most mystics are happy if they get one a lifetime, but painters know that if you just keep at it, you'll get one a day, I guess. Like the thought for the day or the prayer for the day, it's the ecstatic vision of the day. How can you talk to me about the sense of physicality in your work? Is it that you found that you really admired other artists who exude that kind of physicality, or is it just a given, a necessity that you can't make a painting and consider a painting done unless it has this kind of visceral, gutsy physicality about it?
Well, I would say that a lot of what I was interested in the show was the interplay between the works on paper, where the texture is very flat, and then the physical painting objects where that texture quality is very much apparent. And it's an internal sense, and when they kind of get this sort of quality that lets me know that I'm happy with them, and that whole quality is what we seek, that built up thing. So the smudge, the digging, the application of the layers, the finding of colors instead of just accepting of something from the tube is just somehow my process has evolved in that way.
It does make us very aware. And by the way, I'm going to talk to you about the relative flatness of the works on paper in a moment. But I wanted to say that it makes us very aware, doesn't it, of the physical objecthood of each piece, because they are images, they deal with shapes, and they have, however earnest or ironic the title is, they have a sense of the vision about them, something seen rather than simply a shape that's evolved. And yet, it's not a window onto another reality so much, because it's always pulling back, isn't it, to the actuality, the realness and the sense of real time that one experiences with each work. So that's something that you obviously sense strongly.
I'm glad that you see that, because that's definitely something that, someone told me at the opening that I had told them that everything should be specific or something. It's something about specificity. And I was like, yeah, I still stick by that. Like it's about making a very clear, specific kind of like a person or like an individual. And I want each painting within its own set of situations to have that quality. And I guess that's what I'm working towards.
Well, that's for for any painter, that is, I think, an ideal. But I think with an abstract artist who forges a distinct identity for themselves in their practice, to be able to also achieve that degree of individuality with each image is a rare and special achievement, because most artists, if they're able to give absolute individuality and particularity and specificness to each painting, would have to sacrifice the luxury of a trademark style or an unmistakable sense of, oh yes, this is X, Y, and Z. And in the other way around, if somebody is gung-ho about letting the world know that if they see, say, a drip, it's a Jackson Pollock, or if they see a lozenge, it's a Rothko. Well, of course, those artists do have individuality, but not perhaps that they are famous for an idiom, a form, as well as a sensation and an ambition. Now, you have this sort of quality that one doesn't see that often. What one thinks of in, say, an artist like Thomas Noskowski, that you see everyone and you say, oh yes, that's by him, and yet each one seems to be branching off and having a go at something quite different, not for the sake of novelty or eclecticism in its own right, but simply because it wouldn't work, it wouldn't be a successful Pritchard unless it had that individuality. Do you think it's just good luck that you've achieved that, or have you striven for that from day one?
It's just, you either got it or you don't, David. No, I mean, it's obviously there's some sort of, like, I don't know what the word is, a narrative or like a map or a sort of an idea of all these kind of operating together towards some sort of like community or something in my brain, and they do each have their own individuals, but it's the larger kind of project, I think, that they fit into somehow, and that's not determined in my brain, but yeah, getting away from style, having a language or something like that, I'm completely uninterested in that. And so that's where, once I get involved in stuff like that, it's like I get separated somehow from the experience, and that experience or that feeling of what I'm trying to say is kind of paramount.
Right.
Although it exists outside of language, so I can't really.
So you can't now prove the point to us by saying, in this one here, for instance, I was thinking X, Y, Z. Well, that's...
Sometimes I can, but yeah. And that's where the ecstatic visions comes from, because by the nature of the, the whole COVID, and I lost my studio, and I found myself in the backyard of my apartment, and I think a lot of my things that I was trying to do is what I think about it, that in the studio kind of went out the window because I was just in my backyard. And somehow the day came into it. Like, I mean, I've told many times I was painting one day and a freaking hawk came at me, you know, with its claws out, like, whoa, like, you know, while I'm working on a painting, you know, it's like things like that are happening to you. Or one of these paintings is specifically about seeing the conjunction of Mars and Jupiter, you know, because it was just to be painting and having that there.
Yes.
So letting that happen was very much a part of a way of kind of getting out of those language things that you get into.
Yeah. Now, when you say you lost your studio, is it that you couldn't afford to keep it on, or is it that you physically lost it, or you just couldn't get into it?
Yeah, I couldn't afford to keep it on. Yeah,
Right,
I didn't lose
okay.
it. Yeah.
All right,
But,
right.
So that was a whole, you know, the whole COVID, you know, everything changed. And,
Yeah, yeah. Sure. The new paradigm. Yes, yes, of course. And so what do you do if it rains or snows then? Do you have a wet ecstatic vision or?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do actually. There's a lot of these paintings are definitely have taken a soaking.
Yeah.
But you know, I've done some things. I've got a little tarp and bring things inside. You know, my bedroom is you know, smells like my studio now. There's drying paintings around.
Well, the Terps might keep away the second bout of COVID.
Indeed,
So.
yeah. But yeah, so.
If chlorine works, then why not Terps? I mean,
why not Terps?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it's interesting to think of you as this person having these daily ecstasies and working with in a kind of beyond language idiom and abstractly. At the same time, having been a student at the New York Studio School and then the Royal Academy in London. Now, the Studio School has produced as many abstract as figurative painters, and it was in fact founded by abstract artists. It has a reputation for being figurative because it uses models a lot and is interested in perception, but in fact, it's probably as much a training ground for painters who pursue an abstract idiom as it is figurative one. But what did your work look like when you were at the school? Was there anything like this? Did it have any kind of foreshadow of this? And similarly at the academy?
Well, you know, when I was at studio school, I was painting, you know, models, just like you say. I worked with pretty much every teacher that was there. The one thing that I will say is that there was one time where they were like, you having a show in that second floor space. And I went home, I didn't stay at the school, and I did a whole show in 1 week. And it was just these little paintings. And then I put them up just because I was curious of what people would say. And I remember having great talks with Andrew Forge about those paintings.
Oh, right, yeah.
And that was, but aside from that one kind of experiment,
yes,
for the most part, I was, you know, painting rooms and looking at still lives and you know, painting really tight, realistic things and getting very involved in pineapples and cups and such.
And what happened when you went to the Royal Academy in London?
Well, when I went to the RA, you know, that was a very different, you know, conceptual school. I was I think there was 18 people in our class. I was the crazy American. You know, you're working with photographers and people from all over the world. You know, people from Pakistan, Africa, you know, Russia, you know, so it was a huge mix of people from all different disciplines. So your conversations were very conceptual, not about kind of the making or material, you know, at all. Like it was kind of like, what are you doing?
But you, Maurice Cockrell was the keeper. Was he? He's Maurice Cockrell, the keeper of the Royal Academy Schools, is a Royal Academician who's the director or the dean of the art school. And the art school dates back to, you know, Joshua Reynolds in the 18th century. And as you say, it's Americans can't believe they give you a grant and they give you 3 years and they give you a studio and you're there with 17 peers. And so it's hardly the usual MFA mill. So a very privileged setup. But Maurice Cockrell is a painter who deserves to be much better known, and he's somebody I'm privileged to have a few of his works in my collection. And he went through many styles, actually, and figurative, and is best known for his late mature work, which is abstract, and will probably remind most people of maybe a bit of Philip Guston and a lot of Bryce Martin, and something unique, which was Maurice Cockrell, and also a rootedness in English traditions. As well as a broad awareness of European art. So is he somebody who had much impact on you directly?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, the great thing about being over there was, you were meeting, John Hoyland. All these people were around. Hockney, like he said. But yeah, Morris was. I mean, I spent hours and hours with him. Every day you hung out with him and had, tea or have a beer later.
Yes.
He had a studio, in the building, so he was around. He was, a great guy.
Yes. Very self-effacing, but
very
incredibly committed to painting and open-minded, but at the same time resolute. And I can't, I mean, between Graham Nixon and Maurice Cockrell, to have those guys as mentors you'd have to be uniquely untalented not to produce interesting work after meeting those guys and coming under their sway.
Yep.
But on the other hand, there's no luck in art. It's you choose your destiny, you make it. And if you've studied with exceptional people, it's because you had exceptional taste to put yourself in the right place in the right time. So you mentioned that the drawings, and we actually have a wall of them, don't we, just behind us, plus Matthew, if he wanted to, could bring up some. I'm struck by the fact that, yes, they're on paper, therefore they don't have the viscous build-up of matière that you get in your paintings, but you somehow find a way, even within paper, to make sure that the soak, the stain, and the drip give it that visceral quality, even on paper. Is this your temperament, your handwriting? Or is this a conscious development of a language, would you say?
Yes. It is those
Good
things.
answer.
But it certainly is. I think the selection that I chose here definitely, it hangs together kind of. I always think of drawing and sort of leading into painting, and I saw it as sort of secondary, but at a certain point I started to realize that it was its own, like they were their own things, just like paintings were. And breaking down that hierarchy was really, really important to me. I spend just as much time on them as I do on the oil paintings.
Good. This is Doom, which is one of the drawings behind us, and it exemplifies what I was saying, that you in reproduction, you wouldn't immediately, well, you'd know it's a work on paper because of the fact that there are 4 pages and there's a cross, the sense of them joining together. But the immediate sensation is one of forms jumping out at us, thanks to the fact that they do the opposite, they soak in, as it were. But you've got that viscerality, haven't you?
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to get to have painting that looks fast and quote unquote messy, but have the forms actually be highly distinct and the colors to sing is, I think, from what I understand of painting, a particular and special achievement, because to keep freshness with speed and spontaneity, the tendency of all colors when worked fast is to merge into some mushy brown, isn't it? So the fact
There's a lot of failures.
well, they're your business, but the successes are all on the wall to be seen, and it's a freshness and a striving at the same time that I think gives these works their distinctness. Now let's get to the title. Obviously, there must be a little bit of irony there, but how did you come up with that title then? Did you feel?
They asked me what the title of the show was, and I was like, I think I'm just going to not be ironic and say basically what I was trying to go for, and of course it's like so ridiculous, but I was like, no, because of the times, because of COVID, because of this kind of like me embracing color and kind of letting go of all of my stuff, and just trying to make paintings. I just went for it and was like ecstatic visions of the day, and yeah.
To what extent do you feel as an abstract artist working? Well, first of all, what do you think if somebody describes you as abstract? Are you cool with that? Would you describe yourself as abstract? If someone else says, what do you do?
What do you mean by that? I guess for me is, I see the word as slightly derogatory because it's like a label of something, but it doesn't really say anything. It's
right.
And so I try to be a little. In other words, it's not my favorite word, but yes, I do abstract my experiences from the world, and these are kind of taken from reality and shifted and made into something else. So in that sense, it's apt, but I don't like labels.
Well, they seem very much rooted in geometry and in a primary shape vocabulary, like the work that's on the screen at the moment, Rio Grande. That's, it's, let's dwell on that for a moment.
Okay.
Because as you say, they're abstracted from reality. Was there some image or thought that was grounded in something observable out of which this image emerged?
Yes, yeah. Specifically, I was having a tough time. I took a trip to southern Texas, a solo hiking trip in Big Bend National Park, and I just remember, it's blazing hot in the daytime and freezing cold at night, a very odd environment. And coming over, and then all of a sudden, you realize that was the Rio Grande right below you, and then Mexico in the distance, and it was a very striking memory and experience. And this painting started, it was about 4 or 5 years ago that I did that trip, but it started not that long after it, and I've been working on it ever since, and it came together for this show. And
right.
So it is some sort of weird, like inverted, tantric, moon reflection thing, that definitely comes directly out of that experience.
Right. For you, obviously, the viewer wouldn't read it. They might be interested to be told it and then have that as anecdotal reference. But to all intents and purposes, it's a rectangle and two blobs. Now, what's kind of interesting though is the visceral buildup of paint, the yellow ground, and also the inner workings within the rectangle. It's not out of the tube red, is it? It's not a kind of red that Mondrian would. It's not a rectangle that Mondrian would give us. It's come into being through an act of painting. Now, is that simply your way of what felt to you appropriate as the way to put down paint in this particular image, or is the brushiness, for instance, are the visible kind of edges of the brush moving through this luxuriously sort of thick paint on the surface? Is this about, was there a depictive impulse or energy in the way that the brush was moving around?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. But it wasn't thought, it's just discovered, and then when it happens relatively quickly.
And is there any symbolism in the shapes?
Not that I know of.
Right.
No, I mean, not a kind of intellectual symbolism, no.
Right.
But there's something about, mustard yellow and ketchup red that is kind of so revolting that I just
Right.
have a perverse love of putting them next to each other.
Yeah. Well, now you're talking about the Rio Grande and I think, okay, whatever. But mustard and ketchup, that's got my attention because now I can't unsee the mustard and the ketchup in this image. I could probably accidentally forget the Rio Grande, but the mustard and the ketchup, I think, are now etched into my brain. That's cool. Let's, Matthew, maybe we could move on to another image just to, so we don't overdose on, there's more mustard, more ketchup. But this one is called In Sight. And to me, it has a kind of an evocation of the painting you see on masks, African or Oceanic, or in fact, Native American maybe. But maybe that's just my own memory imposed here. So when one works abstractly, quote unquote, it's very difficult for the viewer not to be quite conscious of the history of abstraction. But with figurative or representational painting, the reference is to a thing in the world. With abstraction, it's often, I mean, it can be the same, should be the same with good representational painting as well, but with abstract painting in particular, the sense of the tradition and the possibilities and the limitations as well. Well, there aren't limitations, is the wrong word. The strictures, the restrictions of abstraction, they become something of which one is more conscious. Now, what do you do in your mind and in your soul with style, with the history of style? Do you just block it out? Do you not care? Or are you conscious of style? Do you feel a responsibility as somebody working abstractly to have a position within?
I don't think about it, and I probably should. I'm so anti-style and design, kind of, you know, from just in a visceral, personal sense, that I try to pretend it doesn't exist. But I probably need to think about it more in some ways, because obviously everything looks like something. But yeah, I'm not an expert on style. People need to help me with that.
Well, by style I mean individuals' movements within the 110 years
of
abstraction.
Yes, absolutely. I'm aware of art. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Because this one we're looking at now, Outside Turquoise, it's very, well, the left-hand side with those stripes and the paint kind of, the brush defining the shape leading on the brush, that has a kind of quite sort of Sean Scully-like feel to me. But the pictograms on the right might bring to mind, well, certainly Pollock in the 1940s, and also the Uruguayan artist Torres Garcia, and quite any number of artists who were excited by prehistoric and non-Western sources in the mid-20th century, at a time of the emergence of the art informel or abstract expressionism, or what would become art informel and abstract expressionism. Now, historical abstract art, right up to and including, say, something like artists like Scully or Pat Steer or any host of people. I just had a particular man, Stanley Whitney. Up to that generation, I mean, they're roughly within a generation, there's still that residue of their form, their style, working historically, which is to say, working to define a language.
Yes.
Working, for a painter of your generation, it's become, it is simply there as a given, isn't it, to some extent, without having to worry about what its implications are for the history of art, just worry about what the implications are for Ben Pritchard and make a Ben Pritchard. Now, to some extent, I don't think that was necessarily the case with Pat Steer or Sean, Sean or Scully or Stanley Whitney. They're just at the edge, just at the end of that great trajectory where it had some kind of art historical significance. Does that make sense?
I understand completely.
Now, it could be that one is being provincial in the temporal sense, and that actually anybody who looks like they were making a contribution to art history had the same feelings that you do, and that you were just as able to feel about art history. But you're saying in a way that you're free of that.
Yes, I do. I mean, I'm trying to be free of it. I'm definitely a lot more primitive in that I don't have big goals anymore. And I think a lot of my project has been to kind of take that stuff apart, because I learned all that, and it influenced my thinking for a long time. And I realized that stuff was separate from myself. You know, it's like this other thing that I had learned, and it was helpful. You know, minimalism. I love minimalism. You know, and it kind of permeates my whole way of thinking. But I'm like, minimalism. Like, I didn't make in minimalism, so I'm always kind of like wrestling with it. It creates a tension within me that I'm trying to resolve.
But in terms of touch, and you couldn't be more anti-minimalist, could you?
But in my brain, it's like, you know, all that stuff is kind of like spinning around, or the Stanley Whitney, or the Scully, or the Pollock, or you know, any of these great ambitious artists that I love and admire. You know, they're all kind of in there, but to find a way kind of through them, I had to I don't know, deconstruct that whole kind of enterprise, for sure.
We're looking at a painting right in front of us. I don't know, Matthew, if you can find it for us. The Great Vehicle.
I can just turn.
Oh, you could even do that. It almost looks like it could be an expressionist depiction of a minimalist artwork. You know, it's because we've got these receding boxes within boxes, rectangles, a sort of spiral implied by it. It's on the back room and office page. If that makes any sense to you, Matthew. It's a Great Vehicle. Or maybe we can see it on, yes, we can see it on Benjamin's page, but actually it'd be better to get to the image if you can.
It's blue.
It's blue.
That is one of the images I was given here to show for this.
Right.
It's my apologies.
Oh, it's not in that selection.
No.
Oh, no apologies required. No.
But
Did a selection and it.
Through all of them. Those were all of the images that I have, are the ones that I just showed.
That's fantastic. Look, if everyone just goes to, I'd have to stop talking, but yeah, if you go to Benjamin's screen, you can see it there in the middle. So, as I say, an expressionist depiction of a minimalist work, meaning that it's a kind of sloppy Joe painterliness, but it's a rectangle, squares within rectangles. There you go. Composition. Now, yeah, so hard to think of something really less minimalist in execution, although may I ask then this question about not just that work, but the works in general, that there seems actually something interesting that's common to a number of paintings in this show, is that even though there's a reduced, close-knit palette of blues within this work, we see what almost looks like a built-up scum of a whole other slew of colors around the edge of the painting. And it almost reads in a funny way like a kind of test card of yeah, yes, absolutely. And yeah, there you go, in that work. As you go to the top a bit, if you lift it up, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see at home, but it's, yeah, it looks like the blues that define the painting had to push out the rest of the spectrum in order to gain supremacy within this canvas.
Absolutely.
What does that tell us, do you think, about the way you paint, about the evolution of this image?
You know, I love the de Kooning painting, Excavation, both because of the painting, and I also love the title. And the title of it, Excavation, is something I thought about for years and years as a student. And it's something that is entirely applicable to what I do. And there is this weird relationship between building and tearing down. And I think it is to find a sort of specific color or experience or something. And that is basically what you're looking at. You know,
Yeah.
There is this like work that's happening to find this thing that's specific. And whether that's a color or a structure or something really simple, it goes through this process in order to find it.
Yeah, and that becomes, in the next work we're looking at now, Deep, that becomes very apparent, doesn't it? As soon as I saw the word visions in your title, I was reminded by how much your work has always made me think of the outsider artist, Forrest Bess. You happened to mention visiting, I don't know, where did he live?
He lived in the Gulf Coast.
Right, Louisiana, yes.
Yeah.
Near
Houston,
yeah, that's right. Oh, I see, it is in Texas then.
It is in Texas.
Yes, it is in Texas, right.
But it's like very different from where I was.
Yeah, yeah. And did you go there just because you knew you needed somewhere to have a good walk, or do you have a connection with Texas?
Yeah, well, yeah, I do. So I have a Texas connection.
Ah, right. But as far as, oh, there you are, great. As far as outsider, oh, look, I can be in the picture. Yeah, well, you'd like to both do it, and then we can confuse the world as to who's talking and who's not. Is there, yeah. But you, having been to the Royal Academy of Arts, can't be an outsider by definition.
Definitely not.
Unless you murder someone. I don't want to frighten your dad, who's in the audience, but the Royal Academician of the 19th century named Richard Dadd, who was a painter of fairies. Perhaps because of his name being Dadd, he unfortunately murdered his father and was then committed to an asylum. I don't know if he continued painting or not, but that would, if he did, that's the way to be academically trained and an outsider at the same time. The host has spotlighted your video. Good, thank you. I'll behave properly and go back into my space. But yeah, the joke being really, not the joke, but the point being really, there's no such thing, I think, anymore as outsider art.
No.
It's just not. It's not a conceptual possibility to be an outsider artist because everything outsiders do has been incorporated within the range of styles within which a person might work, and at the same time, the essential criterion of outsider art is that one hasn't had any kind of academic training. And the joke is that for the last 50 years, most people who've been to art school and academies haven't had any kind of academic training either. So where's the great distinction between an outsider artist and an insider artist? But so then, therefore, is that kind of outsider quality, which having demolished the whole notion of outsider art, I'd say your work has an outsider feeling. So there I am. I'm in a kind of spiral of my own deconstructions. But do you know what a person would mean if they said your work has an outsider feel?
I mean, like I say, I love the word direct. I'm not interested in, at this time, technique. I'm not trying to fool anybody or make pictures. I'm just trying to create experiences. And for me, the direct making of them is what I'm interested in. So yeah, I mean, I love Forrest Best because I think he was doing the same thing, direct experiences.
Too direct.
Yeah, hopefully I won't be as direct as him.
Yes,
but,
yes.
That's another inside joke, Dad.
Yes.
But yes, I mean, I think he's a great artist, great American artist, and
Yes.
Working with whatever the psychology and personal, subjective, taking that stuff seriously. Absolutely, all those that whole pantheon of great artists that were trying to say something about their experience is what I'm interested in for sure.
Right.
But I don't see him as being sort of different from Pollock or even Picasso or it's like it is direct painting.
It's direct painting. The possible difference is, but in fact, with Forrest Best, there was an interesting, he was aware of other art. So, but a person who would be classed as outsider, unlike Best, would actually, well, Best, was working in isolation in his cabin, but there's kind of a more interesting history with him and other art. There's even a possibility, by the way, that no, I won't go there. Forget it. I was thinking.
I want to hear about the guy that painted the fairies. And anyway.
Yes, look him up. D-A-A-D. I think his name is Dad. Or is it D-A-D-D? I have to look it up. Richard Dad. Anyway, I was thinking of James Castle, and that I was amazed. You'd think the quintessential, who can be more of an outsider artist, being mute and deaf, and being in a sub post office in the middle of Idaho or Iowa, Idaho, yes. But apparently, it turns out he had an interesting connection to an art school, and his son and his nephew or niece. I'm garbling the story, and this is being recorded and it's public, and I've got a reputation to defend, so I should just say, look up James Castle and art schools. Anyway, point being, actually, we're at the time where I'd like to bring in others who might want to ask questions, but point being that to wrap up on so-called outsider art, that, it's fascinating to hear about, it's fascinating to learn from you the sense of breaking down the need to distinguish between an insider and an outsider, between a player and somebody working out of what Kandinsky calls inner necessity, because any decent artist is working out of inner necessity, and nobody is so outside the loop that they actually aren't aware of the history of art and the possibility of art that's going on at the moment. Of course, they're not going to be as up to speed as others. Now, so my last question to you is, ignoring this last horrible year of isolation and thinking of your career since you came back from London and have been living and working in New York, to what extent do you feel the community of artists buoys you along, not just in a sort of spiritual way, but in terms of your artistic ambition, your ambition within the studio, and within what you think are the parameters of seriousness in your own work? How much does the community of the art world impact your endeavor?
it's everything. You know, I don't think that you know, it's a weird dynamic of you know, spending your days alone with the work, but then having the community I don't think I could even function without it. I mean, I see the work as completely in a network with you know, everybody, whether I act like that or not, you know, but I see, that's why I'm here. You know, there's no other reason to be in New York, you know? But it's in order to have, to be around like-minded people that are also engaged in asking questions and just trying to figure out, you know, what the hell's going on through the kind of creative endeavor. And I see it as very important. Like, I'm a huge major advocate for it. I think a lot of the problems in the world are because, you know, we don't stress it enough. And so, yeah, you know, I for me, you know, you all are what this is for, you know.
Fantastic. Well, on that note, we should allow members of the community that's here for this wonderful Zoom meeting. In fact, I see there are 49 participants. If you want to, and just before we started, Ben said to me, "Oh, this is my first panel." I said, "What? You mean of this season or this exhibition?" He said, "No, it's my first panel, period." And I'd like to say that I still don't believe it, because Ben has been a very forthcoming and generously honest and open co-panelist, and it's been an honor to chat with you, Ben. But let's see, if anyone would like to chip in. I'm one of those moderators who encourages rather than bans statements rather than questions. If you want to say something that you feel about what you've heard today, this evening, and what you've seen of the work, or ask Ben a question. If you go to the bit that says reactions, one of the reactions you can make is apparently to ask, is to put your hand up, isn't it? No, that's not how you put a hand up. There's a way to put your hand up, isn't there? Is that, well, do we know?
I don't know.
I think it's in your participants.
That's it. Yes. Yeah. Okay. I think that Zoom has taken it away, because I had this same problem last night. I don't see how you can put your hand up anymore. Reactions, yes.
Under the reaction. It is there in reactions. It says raise hands.
Heart.
It's right now the best way of working. I have it set up so that whoever is speaking is spotlighted. So if you just want to unmute and ask your question, and maybe if David, you just want to call somebody out so not everyone unmutes at once, then that person will be spotlighted once they speak up. So.
Yeah, that's great, but how will they put their hand up? How will I know that they want to?
Well, there's a reaction at the bottom. If they scroll on the bottom or the top or wherever it is, there's a bar that says security and participants and polling and breakout rooms, and then there's one with a little smiley face and a plus sign that says reactions. And I don't see one for hands up, but maybe they can just put their thumb up or put a heart or a little.
Okay.
If you click on participants, David, you'll be able to see hands. I see Howard Sherman there with his hand up.
Howard Sherman, great. Howard Sherman, wait.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Howard, thank you.
I was just thinking, these are smaller scale, but one of my first thoughts was I think of late Norman Bloom, and I'm wondering if that's someone that that Benjamin ever looked at. They don't look like it, they have their own thing, but I thought of him right away.
Right, late Norman Bloom.
No, not at all.
You might like him. A lot of the language around the discussion tonight about directness and expressionistic tendencies reminds me of that, and he made a lot of really, really large paintings, but I think you'd like, and there's a similar sort of sense of symmetry and composition and stuff. So
I'll check it.
Here we are. Great. I can't see your name, but please, do you know this?
Well, I have a question. First, I'd like to make a couple comments. The first paintings I saw of yours, Ben, the thing that really attracted to me was this tactile quality of the surface. They're very worked and very painterly, very emotional or aggressive. That's how I feel when I see them. And the other thing that I really admire about your work is your work is very successful on a small scale. I've seen many of your small scale paintings, and I think they're very successful, which I just wanted to make a comment on, which sometimes when you think of abstract art, you always think of large scale. But my question is, you mentioned that you work directly. So when you're working directly and in that way, what I'm wondering, are you working intuitively, subconsciously, or is there conscious intention in the way you are working?
I would say I work intuitively, unconsciously, until I find a conscious intention. And so what you see is very conscious, but it's hard to get there. And that's kind of the struggle. But yeah, almost all my paintings are very direct and conscious.
Marvelous. Both Gary and Howard brought up the issue of scale. Now, is the loss of the studio, did that have the effect of curtailing working large? Or I always think of you working quite intimately anyway.
I love making big paintings, and I actually am planning on making 10 giant paintings, but I don't know how I'm going to do it.
Right. That sounds like a fuck you to COVID.
Yes.
But does it come from an inner necessity? Because the work seems quite icon-like.
Mm-hmm. It's basically, I got really interested in the idea of scale, mm-hmm. and the relationship of the image to the so I was trying to make big paintings small, and
right.
somehow everything just shrank down, and now it's really hard for me to make larger paintings for some reason. But I'm kind of, something about that dynamic a number of years ago led me to this place, and I love. I'm finding a lot of positivity in making these kind of really dense, intense images.
It would be a totally different language if they were big, wouldn't it? When one works at this scale, the scruffiness of the work has a kind of urgency to it. And also the scale licenses you to be, as it were, making a maquette for something bigger. So a maquette is always more gnarly and also improvisatory than a big thing. All of your touch would be completely different if you were producing fields of vision.
Huge brushes, and it's it's a big scale up, and it's something I'd like to do, but yeah, since I've gone down this road, it's like this big jump for me to kind of.
We have two participants who have their hands raised, it tells me. Am I allowed to know who they are? Oh yes, here they are, Fran O'Neill and Paul D'Agostino. So let's take Fran first. Fran O'Neill, could you unmute yourself?
Yeah, Ben, we've known each other for a long time, number one, and it's been a great friendship. I'm curious about, and forgive me, I jumped on late, so I'm not quite sure whether you've already touched on this, but there's an immediacy to the works on paper that is really, really pretty direct and pretty amazing for me, right? And then I've also known with your paintings that they can be many years of layering. And I'm just wondering if you can talk about the different ways that you maybe approach each medium, and whether there's a different something that comes from each different medium.
Yeah, absolutely. Every medium has its own qualities for sure, and they inform each other. I think I learned about color through doing watercolors. I feel like oil paint is a very forgiving and kind of friendly medium, and watercolors this sort of brutal, which is kind of the opposite of the stereotypes. But I felt like through kind of the severity of working with watercolor, I was able to sort of understand how color can operate, in my oil paintings, the way that that I imagined it would. So, and it took years and years, of daily work for me to start to kind of, I feel like this show is me kind of starting to get, color to operate the way that I imagined that I wanted it to.
Wonderful.
Good question.
Thank you very much, Fran. Fran is joining us from Australia. And Paul D'Agostino, who's probably joining us from somewhere closer at hand. Paul, would you like to ask your question, make your comment?
Yeah, well, my question was very close to Fran's, really, about the works on paper, because these works on paper seem to be, I don't know if I would say more elaborated, but a little bit more compositionally adventurous than some of the works on paper you've shown in other exhibits and that I'm more familiar with. So I was going to ask about that and also make a comment about scale. So I don't know if you have any further comments about the works on paper that might address that, like the difference between these newer works and works on paper that you've shown previously.
It's really opened up, man. I mean, there's a lot of them, and some of them are getting larger. And that was just, this being outside, not the fuck it approach, just not caring, and just letting the painting speak instead of trying to make art or make a Ben Pritchard or whatever this identity that I thought I was trying to do. It just kind of vanished, and I think everything fell from it. And then you started all over again.
Well, one thing that I wanted to say about scale in general in your work is that I've always found your work to be kind of without scale, in the sense that they're, the kind of immediacy that you talk about striving for and the uniqueness of object for each painting, for them to not be more than that or outside of that, but to remain within that. I've always found that, even when working with you on a show and showing a lot of your small paintings, they were just small in scale, like it didn't take a great deal of labor to carry them, but that was it. Like beyond that, there wasn't, I haven't often found there to be much of this is a big Ben Pritchard as opposed to this is a small Ben Pritchard. He works differently at these different scales. So that was basically my comment.
Yeah.
We kind of seem to be outside of it.
Fantastic. I saw that show that you curated, Paul. It was on just around Christie Street, right?
No, this was at his space.
Right. Okay. I'm sorry. There's method in my madness. Paul had a show in the same space that you had a show
He did.
on Christie Street. That's where my brain is doing that. Jeffrey Bishop. Jeffrey, you want to unmute yourself?
Hi. Ben, I wanted to ask you or David, in the introduction, perhaps it was Michael Gormley who mentioned, it's a little hard to see, but that your installation involved clusters, or I think the word was constellations. And as you were thinking about this, as I'm looking at you, Ben, I think I'm seeing works on paper as well as works on another substrate. In other words, oil painting, watercolor, however you're putting them together. So can you talk a little bit about the organization of these constellations? It's a little bit hard to see in spite of the nice go around film. And last thing before I toss it back to you, I would want to say hi for a friend of yours named Petros, who is in Cyprus. And you remember Petros? I met him at a residency up in Canada a while back.
And
I'd let him know about this evening. I don't see him here, but I'm sure he would want me to say hello to you. So, but the installation is what I'm curious about.
Yes. It's just something that is natural, but it's kind of this kind of goes back to where the work comes from. But there's the superorganism, there's the entire gallery show, there's the individual piece, and I just kind of see them all operating together as groupings. And that's just something I've started to explore with this, instead of the kind of mediated specific object evenly spaced on the wall. I love how they operate with each other. That's how I have them in my house or outside. I'm always looking at them. It has something to do with the objectness of them and how I like to see them operating with each other.
Right.
It's fun.
I
Fantastic.
appreciate
Got-
that because we,
Jeffrey, we've got a couple more people to bring in, and we're close to our time here. Thank you very much indeed. Dina Stone, would you like to unmute yourself, Dina, and let us... Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Hi, Ben.
Yeah.
Congratulations on the work. So it's a comment and a question. Throughout the years that I have been looking at this work of yours, I always had trouble relating to it, except for this particular body of work. I'm so thrilled. I'm so in love with it. And I guess I always wanted to know, and still want to know, what is it that you want us to know, or what is it that you wanted us to feel from the work? And don't turn it around on me and say, well, what do you feel? I was always curious.
I mean, I think I said it in the title. These are like me having this kind of overwhelming experience of like natural life in Brooklyn. I mean, it's so bizarre, and birds, flying past me, and I don't know, it's like life or something like that. And it maybe, I'm becoming more hippie or something, but something about like the lockdown and the quiet and just recognizing like where I am in the world, and that became apparent. And these paintings are pretty direct. Like I'm not making cultural statements. I'm not riffing on I'm saying like, this is life, So it's they're trying to be positive expressions, Always have been. Maybe I was a bit more confused before.
Yeah. I think it shows. I think what you say, it shows, and that is what I feel. Thanks.
Yes. It's something for an artist who's declared that his work is beyond language, to then say to him, okay, what do you want us to feel, is kudos to you for the craftiness of your question. Gosha Karpowicki.
Hello, yes, I just
Hello.
myself. Hello, Ben. So I have two questions. One is, it seems to me that in spite of not wanting to develop the language, we often fall into the traps of language or repeating the forms or so and so. So would you be intentionally improvising, like breaking the rhythm, breaking the language to discover something new? Would this be your way of working? Like, oh yeah, I'm falling into this pattern and it's being too much, so let's see what else I can do that comes out differently out of it. So that's one of my questions. I see you shaking your head. And another one is, it feels to me the works are kind of, like raw, immediate, and just kind of really out there, very, I don't know, fresh maybe. And so do you go back to your works? Would you go back the day after, a week later, a year later, to the work that was done on that day?
Would I go back?
Yeah, would you go back to painting it? Because I feel like there's something immediate that's happened.
Oh, yeah.
It just happened, like the jazz composition. It just happened, improvisation, and then it's done. But do you go back to them and then build on them?
They have long shelf lives. They go on. There's a painting in here, actually, I was talking to someone about, that I actually brought from London, which I moved back here in 2011, I think, or 2012. So that's 10 years, and it just got on the wall, now.
Ah, so that's a key point actually, and thank you therefore very much for that question, Gosha. So the title might lead us to think that they are one-shot paintings, and each one belongs to they are, but they're one-shot paintings that you have some extra shots later.
They're one-shot paintings from what you see, but the paintings, I work on them until they achieve that, and that can take, extended amounts of time. It drives me insane. Yeah, I mean, I don't even. Some of these surfaces have been around for really long times. There's that painting right there. I stretched that at studio school.
Oh my God! Wow. Well, it has a very Guston look. You weren't doing it in the Guston room.
I don't maybe, but I finished it. In this past spring or early summer.
Yes.
So
so you date it by when you finish it.
By date when if I kind of did that whole started in 1995.
Yes.
I'd lose my mind. But they're.
But you gain an interesting reputation.
Right.
So they're like right. Okay. Hard-won images.
Hard-won, yes.
Yes.
Time is something I think about.
Buried into them. Yes, you can. The accumulation, the impasto, actually signifies, or at least lets us know of their complex evolution.
But I don't want to, I do that a lot, but that's not something that I try to do. That's a byproduct of the investigation.
Yes.
So,
well, I think we've come to the end of our.
Because people can ask you about that, right?
I don't know which ones.
The curations.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that was relatively new. This one.
It's
not that bad, but it's. Do you see it?
Yeah, I think if they look at my screen,
Yeah.
look at David Cohen, you'll see
it's not that bad. So I've got ones that are really layered up, but these are old things.
So they were different images before.
Many different images, many different permutations.
So the back of your canvas is like the floor of Francis Bacon's studio.
It is. I love Francis Bacon.
Right, there you are. The exhilarated despair of a messy studio or a scruffy back of the canvas. Well, I'd like to thank everyone. I'd like to thank Ben for a wonderful conversation, and of course Equity and Michael Formley and Gina for being wonderful hosts. But I'd also very much like to thank the audience. I think it's interesting that a critic talks to a painter for a good chunk of time, and then when painters come in at the end, they ask the most fundamental questions, which if they hadn't been asked, would have made this an unsatisfactory exchange. Like how long does it take you to work on them? And things like that. Good, solid, basic questions that arise from actually looking at the work. So thank you very much indeed, audience and questioners in particular. Paul, Dina, Gosha, Fran, and Jeffrey. And great, you'll know where to find Ben if you've got any follow-up questions, anybody. But I think it's our time to say thank you very much and enjoy this
Thank you.
evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I'll say good night.
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 Good night.